Kevin Acee, whether you want to believe him or not, he wrote something in his Padres daily newsletter about the Padres planning to curb spending in 2024. He said their projected target is evidently around $200 million, which that's a pretty big drop because if you go look on Spot Track or on Fangraphs, right now their payroll is over $250 million. Fangraphs and Spot Track, they don't have the exact same number when you look at them. And then there's different payroll numbers. There's like the base salary payroll total number. There's the luxury tax payroll number. I don't know which one you want to go with, but if you just go with, I think the basic, not the luxury tax one, but just the payroll one, it's over $250 million on both sites. So I'm just going to go with the 250 number. And let's say Kevin is correct here. Their projected target around $200 million. So you're dropping $50 million in your payroll. I don't really see that happening with this Padres team. I think that the payroll is going to drop, but just look at this. Snell, 16.6 mil this year. Let's say he doesn't come back. Okay. So you save that money. Hader, 14.1 mil this year. You save that money. Drew Pomerantz, $10 million. That comes off the book. Finally, thank goodness. Luis Garcia, $3.75 million. That comes off the books. Don't know if he's going to come back. And if he comes back, don't know if it's going to be for that much. So you add up all those guys, and that's not all of the players. Those are just some of the main ones. Snell, Hader, Pomerantz, those are the big ones. That's $44+ million coming off of the books. And then you got Soto. He's making $30 million probably in arbitration. If they have Juan Soto on the roster next year, I think they should. The whole 3 pennant races thing that AJ talked about when they acquired him, it's not going to be 3. Don't have it be 1. Let's try to have it be 2 next year. I want to see what this Padres team can be with Juan Soto on the team in his walk year. I think that could be pretty scary for the rest of the league. So let's say Soto's there. Well, okay, so $44+ million from Snell, Hader, Pomerantz, Garcia off the books. But you add 30 back on. Okay, now that's $14 million. What about if you bring back Michael Wacha for $16 million on the club option? Where there goes the money that from those guys that I just named, Snell, Hader, Pomerantz, Garcia, right? There goes that money by paying Soto $30 million. Well, I guess you got to factor in how much money Soto's making this year and then add the whatever more is how much $30 million is more than what he's making this year. So technically not, but you get my point. Like, even if they take all that money off of the books from those few players, you're still going to not have a payroll of $200 million because you have to go fill those holes somehow, right? I think they'd bring in some veteran starter to replace someone like Blake Snell or to replace Wacha, Lugo, and Snell if all 3 end up not coming back. So, you got to fill the hole somehow. And we know that the Padres farm system, at least the top of it, it's not strong in guys that are ready for next season on opening day. That's more like 2025, maybe end of 2024, maybe post All-Star break. I don't really see it as being opening day, ready to go, cheap salary like that. So I don't know. I just don't see how that $200 million number is actually factual. Like, that's going to end up happening. That might be what Kevin is hearing. Like, I don't doubt that is what he has heard from people probably in the Padres organization. Maybe he's talked to some agents and all that know that have already had some conversations with people with the Padres about what they want to do in the offseason, whatever. But I'm just looking at the payroll right now, assuming that the Fangraphs and the Spot Track number, those numbers are correct, and the money coming off the books, but you got to go fill those holes somehow. I just don't see them getting to that $200 million number there. I mean, if they trade Soto, okay. If they don't bring back Wacha, they don't bring back Lugo, they don't bring back Snell, Hader, Pomerantz, Garcia, that's a lot of money coming off the books. But how are you going to replace those guys? Are you going to replace those guys with guys that are making $700,000? I just don't see that happening. Like, the Padres next year, at least I think, Peter Seidler, is still going to want to go all in on next year's team. Maybe again, not to the level of this year's payroll, but he's still going to want to go all in because, I mean, this season has been a massive disappointment and he wants to win. And he says that he does, at least that's what he said, I think, before this season started. He's not a big believer in windows, but you got to look at the facts. I mean, Xander's not getting younger. Manny's not getting younger. Soto could be there for his final season. And if you trade him, I mean, then he's not there anymore, obviously, at all. But I think that's a motivation to be like, hey, let's try this with Soto. And that's more motivation to continue to go all in because who knows if this is going to be your last shot with one of the better hitters in baseball on your roster, you know? So we'll see what happens. But yeah, that's what Kevin wrote. Now, it is worthy to note, as was pointed out on social media, that Kevin also said last offseason, I believe, that the Padres had around $25 million to spend in the offseason to fill first base and left field and starting pitching, those holes. And what do the Padres end up doing? They end up giving Robert Suarez a big contract. They end up bringing back Nick Martinez. They end up giving Xander Bogaerts $280 million. They signed Michael Wacha. They signed Matt Carpenter. They signed Nelson Cruz. And you go on and on. It's like, oh, well, they spent more than what was wrote about there. So obviously Kevin's not, and it's not just Kevin, whoever writes about what the Padres offseason plans are, they're not Peter Seidler, right? Peter Seidler, at the end of the day, he's the one that decides the budget. I'm sure AJ Preller has a huge voice in that, and people in the front office have a big voice in that. Those that really know everything about the payroll that is on the roster, right? But he's just making his best educated guess. But again, I think it's worthy to point out that last year, his educated guess, at least initially, I believe in the offseason, it ended up not being correct. Because AJ Preller, it's not like a knock on Kevin. Like AJ Preller, he's just unpredictable. So we can try to predict what's going to happen, but we don't really know what's going to happen because he's not. It's pretty hard to predict what AJ is going to do. And I'm really interested and fascinated by what he is going to do in this offseason because there's a lot of questions for this Padres team. Juan Soto, do you try to extend him? Do you trade him? Do you bring back Michael Wacha? Do you bring back Seth Lugo? Can you bring back Seth Lugo? Because he's probably going to have interest on the free agent market, right? What do you do with the infield situation? At first base, do you bring back Garrett Cooper? The catching situation, do you bring back Gary Sanchez? Do you try to bring back Blake Snell and Gary Sanchez? Trent Grisham, his future in center field. Do you want to move Tatis to center field? Is Jackson Merrill part of your plan early on in 2024? What are you going to do when, assuming Hader leaves with the bullpen? How are you going to improve that bullpen? Is Bob Melvin still going to be here in the offseason? Or is he going to be here for 2024? There's a lot of questions. Is AJ going to be here? I mean, I think we know the answer to that, but I guess that's a question before we talk about the roster. But yeah, there's a lot of questions. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, that was interesting about the Padres planning to curb spending in 2024, which it's expected because, they lost money this year because of the Bally TV deal going away and Major League Baseball. I think they paid the Padres or they are paying the Padres 80% of what Bally was supposed to give them. So losing money there, obviously huge payroll. So I was expecting it to go down, but I just don't expect it to go down all the way to $200 million for 2024. Like that's a big drop compared to where the payroll is right now, So we'll see what happens.